Hey there everybody, my name is Gene Kelly and I am a breathwork instructor with Breathless Expeditions here in Australia. And what I want to do in today's video is cover a paper that I've been studying titled Neurophysiological Model of Altered States of Consciousness Induced by Breathing Techniques. So translation, what this paper is trying to do is explain what's happening internally, physiologically in the body when people enter altered states of consciousness when they do these breathing techniques. And this is quite personal to me because it was these altered states of consciousness that were induced by breathing techniques that really changed my life and set me on this trajectory of spreading the word of the breath. To give you a little bit of a background of my story, I had my heart broken when I was quite young, didn't have the tools to deal with it, and developed a little bit of a armor around my heart that turned into a cage, and this really prevented me from not only giving love but receiving love to others and myself. And this really resulted in a lot of self-sabotatory behavior in relationships, a lot of self-sabotage, a lot of unnecessary suffering. But through breath work I was able to enter an altered state of consciousness that revealed all this sort of stuff to myself, and I was able to make some really positive change, and now I'm making up for a lot of lost time, spreading a whole lot of love. So that's why I'm so passionate about spreading the message of the breath. But it's not just a whole bunch of hippies huffing and puffing in a circle. There's a lot of science and data behind what's actually happening in the body that cracks people's hearts and minds wide open when they do some of these breathing techniques. So that's what we like to do here at Breathless, is marry the spiritual with the really grounding scientific. And that's what I love to talk about. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So when we're talking about the neurophysiological aspects that are induced by these breathing techniques, we first need to start with a nice, easy question, which is, what is consciousness? What are these altered states of consciousness that we're working with? And for the purpose of this video, the best way to think of consciousness is it's everything that gives rise to your conscious experience. And that consists of the inner world, so things that are happening inside of you, and that can be your thoughts, your memories, your emotions, but also your physiological systems, your digestive system, your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system. Anything that's internal plays a role in consciousness, but also the external world, which you can see over here. So the world that surrounds you, and consciousness is this relationship between the inner and outer world. And you can think of the nervous system as the mediator between the inner and outer world. So for example, when it's cold in the outer world, your nervous system makes physiological changes in your internal world to make sure there's balance between inner and outer. So for example, if it's cold in the outer world, your nervous system will make you shiver to warm you up and restore that balance. So that's really, really critical to understand. Now, when we're talking about the real neurophysiology about all this, we need to consider that we're talking about temporal parts of the brain. So the parts of the brain that are responsible for creating your experience. So preserving your consciousness. So this could be your short and long-term memories. So an example would be like, we're not goldfish where we keep forgetting what happened a minute ago and the minute before that and the second before that. We kind of use our temporal parts of the brain to establish a timeline that creates our life story, right? So the temporal parts of our brain are involved in consciousness. So that's our internal experience, but also the spatial parts of our brain. So the parts of our brain that interpret the world around us and create 3D reality in which we operate. So that's really important to think about and know as we move forward in the conversation. Now, when it comes to altered states of consciousness, an altered state of consciousness refers to anything that differs from the typical states. So pretty much what that means is wakefulness, dreaming, so sleep, and meditation. Those are kind of the basic normal states of consciousness. So when we entered altered states, we're talking about a different type of state separate from those. And a lot of you may not have ever entered in an altered state of consciousness, and maybe that's going to spark your curiosity about trying some of these breathing techniques. But anyhow, when it comes to altering our states of consciousness, what this paper is trying to do is establish, how does it happen? How can we reliably induce these altered states? And the authors of the paper put forth a theory that there was something they called the critical triad. So the critical triad was slowing the breathing down, focusing your attention on a specific target, and also nasal breathing. So we're going to unpack this clinical triad. I'm going to explain to you how this affects your alters your state of consciousness. So when we're talking about slow breathing, it's been very well documented that slow breathing alters your nervous system. So for this to make sense, you need to know that there are basically two primary branches of the autonomic nervous system. There's the stress branch and the relax branch, or the rest branch. So the stress branch is called the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. The rest or relax branch is the parasympathetic branch. So when you slow your breathing down, it tells your nervous system that you're safe, you're calm, you can relax. So we're activating the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. Now, the main innervating nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system is what's called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is basically the body's major highway. So 80% of the nerves what would you say? 80% of the vagus nerve travels from the body to the brain as opposed to the brain to the body. So what this means is that a lot of messages are coming from the body up to the brain via this vagus nerve. So your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, all these systems are sending information to the brain so the body can maintain this balance we mentioned earlier. So we know that slow breathing activates the rest or relax branch of the nervous system through the vagus nerve. And this vagus nerve reaches deep into the brain. Okay, so this is how we can open the doorway into the brain, and not just, the very basic primal parts of our brain, but even high level parts of our brain too. Something you understand about the body, if you care to study it at all, is that everything's connected. You can't separate one piece of the body from another. Sort of like how we exist in the world. You are part of something big, part of this massive ecosystem. So that's important to know. Slow breathing activates the rest branch of the nervous system through the vagus nerve, and that gives us access to all sorts of levels of the brain. In addition to that, specifically, it activates or regulates or changes or alters the parts of the brain that are responsible for our panic or our stress response. Now, this stress response in the body directly relates to what's called the reticular activating system. Now, the reticular activating system is something really interesting and useful to know about, because the best way to explain it is that as you go about life from being a little kid up to being an adult, you have experiences, and your brain tries to make sense of these experiences, and gradually you build up an idea of how the world works. And then that gets programmed into your reticular activating system. And then the reticular activating system acts as kind of like a filter. So as you go about your day-to-day life, you are constantly looking for things through this filter to confirm the world is as you believe it to be. Because if the world is as you believe it to be, you know where you are, you know how to act, and you're safe, so you can kind of relax. If something unexpected popped out of nowhere, that would throw your reticular activating system off, that would be a threat, and you'd freak out. But if things are as you believe it to be, if the world matches your experience, you're safe. And slow breathing plays around with this reticular activating system, and it alters where we focus our attention. It changes how aroused we are in the nervous system, which means how alert and switched on we are. And that also alters our emotions. So for example, if your reticular activating system sees something that's abnormal, it's going to grab your attention, it's going to put your nervous system on alert, and it's probably going to give you some negative emotions because you don't know where you are. And these negative emotions, this arousal, this attention, motivates you to act and address this strange situation, because it could be a threat to your survival. Now, slow breathing plays around with all that. So slow breathing messes with your attention, it plays around with how alert and switched on your nervous system is, which we discussed over here, and it also can alter your emotions. And slow, calm breathing leads to a slow, calm nervous system that's conducive and parallels positive emotions. So this is all just with slow breathing. Then we come to focus. So focusing your attention on one single thing is what's called a top-down action of the brain. So the higher level parts of your brain are choosing to focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. And redirecting your attention back to that target, back to the target, back to the target is a choice. You're not being pulled around by your animalistic desires or cravings. You're making an executive decision at the high level parts of your brain to focus on something. And what that does is that creates what's called a meta-awareness. So it's an awareness that can become aware of the way your mind wanders and the way you lose attention on certain things. And this can be really, really useful. This is akin to meditation. So they believe that breathwork and meditation can have very similar effects because you're focusing your attention. With meditation, it might be focusing on just nothingness. With breathwork, we're focusing on the breath. But we do know that meditation, and we'd expect the same for breathwork, it exercises the parts of brain responsible for self-awareness, attention control, and self-regulation. And what this means is that you can act in ways that are conducive to your long-term goals. Okay? Because if you've got better emotional regulation, you're not going to act impulsively when you get upset. If you've got better self-awareness, you can notice yourself acting out those old pathways, those old unhelpful patterns, say, that you're trying to change. So emotional regulation, self-awareness, and attention control. With attention control, you can focus on your goals and where you want to go across time. So meditation does all that, and so does breath work. When we look at what's happening as far as your brain waves with this though, we see an increase in alpha brain waves, which is described as a state of relaxed alertness. We've got gamma and theta brain waves as well, which is deep relaxation. And these brain waves are the same brain waves that you see when yogis go into deep, deep meditation. So there's something going on here when we focus on a specific target that's really, really good for our brain. So that's important to know too. That's part 2 of the critical triad. And then finally over here, we've got nasal breathing. This is really interesting. So you've got something in your nose called the olfactory bulb. It's like a bunch of nerves. You can actually kind of see it there. That's called the olfactory bulb. Now, when you breathe in, you stimulate this olfactory bulb, and these messages get sent from that nerve down the olfactory tract to all different parts of the brain. This elicits the smelling receptors in the brain that then register the odors that you're smelling. But what's interesting is that this olfactory bulb activates parts of the brain that are not involved in smell. In this experiment, they just sent odorless air in the nose, and it still tickled the olfactory bulb and lit up parts of the brain that are responsible for smell and also not smelling. So again, this is another doorway to different areas of the brain. So between these 3 things, through nasal breathing rhythmically and stimulating the olfactory bulb, which gives us access to the brain, through slowing down our breath, which calms us down and also gives us access to the brain, it can change the way we put our attention on things, how alert we are, and our emotions. And then this meta-awareness with our focus, this all results in a altered state of consciousness. And this can, again, just like peeling an onion, can reveal layers and layers of yourself that you can then do what you want with. You can take that information and use it to better yourself. So what we've seen here with these altered states of consciousness is that they're characterized by your attention being drawn inward. There's altered experience of body and time. So these parts of the brain here in the nervous system have to do with association areas, sensory areas, and motor areas. So the way your body moves, what you're feeling, and the associations that you're drawing, all affected by this slow breathing. There's a decrease in volition control of thoughts. So you stop controlling your thoughts, and there's a decrease in rational thinking. So I guess you could say you think outside the box at this point. And this is, like I said, all to create an altered state of consciousness that, from my experience, can be really, really useful for self-introspection, self-reflection. It can be quite life-changing. That's certainly what I've found for me, and this is why I'm so curious and excited to spread this message to the world, because it can be incredibly healing. The bottom line is, though, gang, is that we don't really know. I don't think we're ever going to really know. I say that experience is understanding. When you come and try this for yourself, you don't really need to know the nuts and bolts. Like, what I'm trying to do here is explain to you how a television works when you just really want to watch the TV show. So I encourage you to watch the TV show and then make up your own mind. Come try some of these techniques, see how it works for you. And if you're curious about what actually happened, well, there's a bit of an explanation. But gang, I hope you enjoyed that. This is me just jamming out. You can follow me on Instagram @GeneKellyPT. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time.